Hey, what's up coders, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll show you how to use an orientation property in your Flutter application. I'm sure whenever you're developing apps, there might be this one single page in your app that you'd like to display differently in a landscape mode when compared to the portrait mode. So in those scenarios you definitely use orientation property. So today we'll see how to use it and how effectively we can use this. So if you look at this demo application that I'm going to show you in the video, the one on the left side is the portrait mode. It's a simple product. It's an e-commerce app page. So it's a simple product description with the content stacked one below the other. But when you look on the right side, this is the tablet mode or the landscape mode, where the picture is on the left and the content is scrollable on the right. So this is one such scenarios where you could use the orientation property, or it could be a kind of a recipe app where you have all the recipe instructions displayed in one side, and when you click on them you have a more detailed description about the list item. So I also have an emulator running so I can show you how it looks. So you could see that this is a simple e-commerce app, and when I get it onto the landscape mode, you could see that it's splitting up the screen into two, like the product is displayed on one side and the details are displayed on the other side. So this is how you could get your same content displayed in two different styles when you use it in a portrait or in the landscape mode. So we'll see how to achieve this. So let me clear up the template and we will start implementing this. Well, to start up with the implementation, I have a very plain bare-bone Flutter project here with the app bar. So there are a lot of things to be considered before you start designing this. So the first thing that it would be is the first point is make sure that you understand the layout of your page before designing it. So make sure that you do not add the entire content into a single widget. Try to split your sections into different widgets so that when you're using it in tablet mode, we can actually restructure it and say, okay, these components has to be in rows and these widgets has to be in column. So it becomes very easy to separate it and easy to implement rather than rewriting the code again just for a small change. So if you look at this, I have divided this entire page so I have a floating button here with a center, add to cart, and a palette, color palette, and a favorite here. So this is my floating button part. That's one section. And I have this picture section. So I'm making it into one widget. Then I have this heading with the price and the discount. I've put into another widget, and this available sizes with the chip I've put into a separate widget, and this instructions or the details in a separate section, and the product details into a different section. So when you make the sections into different widget, it becomes easier to lay them out when you're using the landscape mode, so that you know which content has to be shifted in the left or right depending on your use cases. So to start up with, first I'm going to design this floating button. So it's a simple floating button with the bottom navigation. So I'm just going to use a floating button here. So let me quickly grab the details. Okay, so first I'm going to use is the floating action button, which is after your app bar. So it's nothing but a simple text and an icon which says add cart. And then I'm going to make sure that this is the location of this floating button is the center docked. So if you look at this, the position of it is center docked, so that I get it in the center of my page. Then moving on to my bottom navigation, it's nothing but two icons separated using the property of the row, which is the main axis alignment. So if you look at the bottom navigation bar, it's nothing but a row, and I'm saying space between so that it gets separated in the two corners, and I'm using icon button with the font awesome icon. One is the color palette and one is the heart, so that you could give it a favorite. So this is about my floating button, and my bottom navigation. Now is the important thing, which is my body section of the app. So first thing what I'm doing is I'm coming to the body part. First I'm giving it into a separate widget. So I'm saying it's a layout details, because I don't want to add all the widgets in this section. In fact, I want to keep it as separate, as I mentioned. So now what is this layout details? So moving on to that, so this is where we are going to define what has to be displayed in your orientation. So I'm going to say widget, and then I'm going to say layout details, and this is gonna, okay. So first thing, so now how do we find the orientation of the screen so that we know it's in the landscape or the portrait mode is, whenever we used to use media queries to use the width and height properties, similar way we have something called orientation, which is nothing but media query of context and then orientation. So this way I'm getting the orientation of the screen. Now once I have this orientation property, I'm going to say if my orientation is equal to orientation dot portrait. So this tells me that if this is a portrait mode or if it's a landscape mode. So this is where you can give your entirely a different structure for your pages. So this clearly says it's a portrait mode. Now what I'm doing here is I'm saying that if it is a portrait mode, I'm going to use these details. So I'm going to say return these functions. Now I'm going to define these widgets separately so that when I move on to the landscape mode, I don't have to add them all in column. In fact, I'll be using only these two in one side and the rest I would be adding in the other section. So I'll show you how it appears. Now I'm saying that if it is a landscape mode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it a row. Now I'm going to tell you why I'm adding this inside a row is, if you look at the app page here, this one seems to be like a column just one below the other. So that's what I've added here. I'm saying it's a single child scroll view. It's a column and I'm adding all the details one below the other, just like stacking it one below the other. But if I move on to my landscape mode, it's not the case. I need something on the left and the rest of the section on my right. So what I'm doing is I'm adding it as a row. I'm making it a row. So I'm saying the picture landscape has to be here, and in another container, my rest of my other widgets gets into it, like the product section, the size, the details, and the product details. So this is how you separate your section. This way you can also minimize the number of widgets that you create, and with a little twist you should be able to create this page and not recreate the entire page again for the landscape. So that way you can avoid. So this is the difference. So the main difference is, if it's find out the orientation, if it's portrait, add the layout here. If it's the landscape, the only twist is I'm putting it inside a row so that I can get that split here. So now moving on to the picture landscape and picture section, the difference is, if you look at the other picture here, okay, I think here the width is the entire screen, but here the width is the half of the screen. So that's the only difference in the picture when compared to the portrait and the landscape. The rest, all the content remains the same. So for that difference, I've used two widgets. So I'm going to quickly grab those widget details and I'll show you how it works. Alright, so if you look at the picture section for the portrait mode, okay, it's nothing but a container with the width of the entire screen and the height half and an image inside it, so that I can get the width and the height as half and the image. And similarly for the landscape mode, the width is half, the height is the entire screen, and then the image. So that's the only difference between the portrait and the landscape mode. So you can see that I've used another media query with a width and a height, different parameters. So if I do a hot restart, you could see the difference. There you go. So in the portrait mode, you could see that the image and the floating button with the bottom navigation. And when I do the landscape mode, you see that it's picking up the half of the screen and the rest is for the detail. So this is that the orientation is the one which plays a major role in splitting up your screen and displaying it differently depending on the use case. So now let's to the detail section, which is nothing but just a simple containers with buttons and text and icons. So let me show you the portrait mode first. So first thing, we have the product section. It's the same thing for the landscape mode also. I'm not using a different widget. It's the same widget. The only place we had to take care was the image and the details. So the rest all is the same. So if you see the product section, it's a single widget, which is nothing but, so it's a combination, it's a row, it's a combination of text. So you can see here it's the first container, which is the title, and the next one is nothing but it's a column widget with the text 35% and the price. So that's your product section. So I just have one widget, and that works both for my portrait mode and my landscape mode. So if I do a hard restart, let's see the output. So there you go. So you can see the product section here with the price details. So similarly, I'm going to release the size section. So if you look at the size section, it's nothing but a simple column widget with a text container which has a text, and then I've used the size box just to ensure that I have some kind of spacing, and then I'm using a wrap with my chips. Now if you have seen my wrap video, I've used these chips to display those small icon buttons. So similar way, if you want, I can leave a link in the description about the wrap video, so you can see how I've done that. So if you look at that, it's nothing but a simple raised button with a rectangular border with a circular border radius 30. So that is what is all about this my chip part. And yeah, so if I do a hard restart, you should be able to see the available size section. Yeah, so there you go. So you see the available size section. So similar way, I'm going to release the other container, which is the instruction, which is nothing but a simple two text displayed one below the other. But I'm going to show you how to achieve these bullet points, because this is something different and very simple to do it also. So if you go to the instructions, I've used the container called bullet details. It's also separated into entirely a new widget. So if you see, it's nothing but a container of height and width 10, and I've given a decoration with a box shaped circle and a particular color. So this, by doing this, I was able to achieve this bullet. So you can see the bullets with your text. So this is what I've used. So yeah, so let's do a final hard restart, and then let's see how this looks on the portrait and the landscape mode. Okay, there you go. So in the portrait mode, you can see the pictures, the size, the description, everything, and with the floating button. And when I switch on to the landscape mode, you could see that it picks up the half of the screen and the details are displayed here. So the only difference was the orientation property. So ensure that you make sure that the only tip that I would like to give you in this section is make sure that you separate all your widgets, all your sections into separate widget, and then use the orientation property like mentioned here, which is the let me show you once again. Yeah, here you go. First, get your orientation of your screen, which is the media query of the orientation, get it up, and then check if this orientation is portrait, then display your content accordingly. And if it is not the portrait, if it's the landscape, then display your content differently. But when you're doing this, most of your content would remain the same. The only small changes would be the section that you'd like to split it up. So the rest all will remain the same. So this is how you achieve the portrait and the landscape mode in your Flutter application. So if you have any questions related to this, please leave me a comment below and I'll get back to you. And yeah, hope you like this video. If you do like this, please give it a like and share. And if you find this informative, please do share it. Thank you.